I must rebuild the resistance, so we can resist the uprising, against the insurgency, who's resisting the rebellion, against the insurrection.
What?
No tears!
I wasn't even
Look towards the stars at the rising dawn. The resistance will be there, and Tribor will be there leading it.
Hey everyone, Andrew here, and I'm just doing a quick Magic deck tech. This is my first time doing this, so I'm trying some stuff out to see how I can do this the most efficient way, so I can get content out quickly, and I really just want to talk about Magic decks. This is going to be a quick deck tech, so I'm not going to go over every single card in this deck and everything it's trying to do. I just want to highlight the cool things of this deck and things to think about with this commander. But this is my Lin Sivvi deck tech. As you can tell, I've altered mine to be Tribor. It's one of my very early alters, so it's not my best work. Actually, let me pull that out of the sleeve, so hopefully it won't reflect as much. And yeah, this is my Tribor, basically Rebel Tribal deck. And I'm going to try to use this web page here, which is one of my favorite deck building web pages. I like it because it's so visual, and it allows me just to see all the cards in front of me. If I can't physically have the cards and set them down, this is what I'll use. But this is actually my physical deck, which is sitting right here. Alright, let's just talk about the commander really quick. So the Commander Lin Divine Hero is 3 mana, 2 white, and 1 generic for 2 really good abilities and a 1/3 body. So the abilities are pay X, tap it, search your deck for a Rebel card with converted mana cost X or less, and put that card into play, then shuffle your library. The second ability is pay 3 mana, put target Rebel card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. So right away, you can tell that we are basically dealing with Rebels here. We can grab them from our library, or we can cycle them from our graveyard and put them underneath. So right now, it's a really good ability, except that it grabs Rebels. And Rebels are okay-ish. There's some red-black hate in the deck, which is kind of unique. You can exile red creatures with some of the creatures. You can get protection from red and black with some of the other creatures. So it's interesting, but it's not necessarily going to win you the game, because what if red and black is not in the game? Those kind of things. So it's a fun ability, but it's not necessarily broken, which it could be if it was in a proper tribe like Elves or Folk or something. If you could actually search your deck for some of those really juicy creatures and put them into play, you can do some really devastating stuff. With the Rebels, it's not so bad. But the thing I do like with this commander is that if a Rebel gets killed, I can cycle it from the graveyard to the bottom of my deck and then use her top ability to play that Rebel back out almost immediately. And so it's a really good utility. The fact that she can do this at instant speed is huge. The fact that she puts it into play and dodges like counter spells is also quite big. So yeah, the commander itself is quite strong. Even though it works with a weaker tribe, I think the ability itself pulls that tribe to a slightly higher power level than you would expect. Another card that's in this deck that makes this commander just really sing, it's a brand new card, and that one is this one here, Maxwood Nexus. So its ability is creatures you control are every creature type. And then it's also the same for creatures that you control that are not on the battlefield. So creatures in your graveyard, your deck, your hand are all creature types, including Rebels, which means your commander can now grab any creature from your deck and cycle any creature from your graveyard to your deck. So it's a really good, strong card for this commander. The other ability is actually not horrible either. It's you spend 3 mana and you tap it and you create a 2/2 shapeshifter creature with Changeling, so it also is every creature type. So it creates you creature tokens that help you go wide, and it makes sure that your commander's ability affects every creature in your deck. I mean, this is pretty much the best card in your deck. Now, Enlightened Tutor has been put into this deck mainly to help find Maxwood, because that card is just so good with commander. You want it out ASAP. You can just pretty much get any of your key creatures out, which I'll go over in just a second. But it also helps you grab any other key artifacts if you have your Maxwood already in play, or if it's already been exiled and you just don't have it anymore. It helps you get some more utility cards that help you kind of continue going. It's just a solid card for the deck. Oh yeah, the first kind of like group of cards I want to talk about here are card draw cards. And in particular, this one, Esper Sentinel, is a very good one. It's a 1 mana, 1/1, that has the effect whenever an opponent casts the first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card, unless that player plays X, where X equals the Sentinel's power. So In this deck, there are a lot of like equipments and stuff that can make them stronger, so that can actually be quite high tax. But the reason I really like this one is that it only draws you the one card, so players are actually more likely to give you this card than they are with something like Ristic Study, where you can get a lot of cards in their turn, and they're like, okay, you can get like 5 cards in my turn. It's like, well, I can get a maximum of 1 with this card. And that kind of sneakily sometimes gets you more card draw than some of the other cards do. The other thing that's nice about this is that because of what it does, it tends to eat removal. But with Maxwood in play, your commander can spend 3 mana to put it underneath your deck and 1 mana to put it right back into play. So for 4 mana, you just get it right back. So it's not really worth removing, which is quite cool. The next one I want to talk about is Mentor the Meek. Now, Rebels generally are weak. You know, power 1 and 2 is not uncommon, and most of the cards in this deck have power 1 or 2. So Mentor the Meek becomes a really strong card draw engine, as you can just, every time you get a Rebel into play, you can pay 1 and draw a card. And since it's not a cast trigger, it allows you to do it even when your commander pulls them out of your draw deck. So it's just a very good card in this particular deck. Now, the last card draw creature I want to talk about is Mangara the Diplomat. Now, Mangara has the ability that whenever an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, you get to draw a card. Or whenever an opponent casts a second card each turn, you draw a card. So that second bit is probably more common than the first bit once he's in play. Lots of times people will just send 1 creature at you to stop you from getting that card draw, but now they're only sending 1 creature at you, so it kind of gives you a little protection. But yeah, it's a great card draw mechanic. So these 3 creatures together add a lot of card draw to the white deck that it normally doesn't have, and the commander being able to pull them out is great. Now I'm just going to go over a couple other key creatures that I put in here that aren't rebels, and then I'll kind of go over some of the rebels. One of the cards you can get in the deck that isn't card draw, that isn't a rebel with the commander once Maxwood is in play, is Elvish Norn. Now this card gives everything that you have in play plus 2 power, which, like I said earlier, your creatures are kind of weak, so getting plus 2 power is a great boost, while also making all your opponent's creatures -2, which lets you get in and get that combat damage, because most likely your creatures will kill their creatures without being killed themselves. So it is a really great card, and when Maxwood's in play, the fact that you can cycle it and get it back, it's a lot of mana, but at the same time, it's really hard to remove unless they exile it. So it's a very strong card with that combo. A couple other cards that are in here are some mana ramp. So once your commander gets in play, if Maxwood's in play, you can search them up, but if it's not, then you can just play them to get the mana ramp to kind of keep up with other players. And one of the key aspects are ETB mana abilities. So I have Solemn Solacrum, which, of course, when it comes to play, I get a basic land, so planes in this deck, and just put it into play. And when it dies, I get to draw a card, so it's pretty good in white. I'm kind of finding, like, in my green decks, I'm using this card less and less because it's a bit expensive for what it does. But mono white, it's actually quite good because those are the 2 things that white doesn't do very well, put into 1 creature. So I still think Solemn Solacrum has a very strong home in mono white decks, and in this one in particular. So the other Solemn Light creature, this one isn't as good as Solemn because it doesn't let you draw a card when it dies, but it is another way to get a land and just put it into play. This one searches your deck for a plains card and puts it right into play. Now this one doesn't have to be a basic land, so if you have non-basic plains, you can put them right into play with this one as well. And once you get Maxwood out, you can actually get your commander, pull it out, put it into play, get it killed, and then do it over and over again to get more and more plains out. Same thing with the Solemn Solacrum. So just another ramp ability in the game that's creature based, which I always like creature based ramp. It's a little bit more expensive than you want to do it because you technically want to ramp on turn 3 or turn 2. This is turn 4, but with white you're going to be behind no matter what you do with lands, so this is just a good way to catch back up and get a body to block. So even though it's more expensive, that extra body gives you a little bit more flexibility. Next I want to talk about Mirror Entity. It's technically not a rebel, but it is because it is a changeling. If you are used to tribal type decks, you probably have seen this if it has white. It's just a very strong tribal card, and the rebels kind of need this type of boost. So for 3 mana, you get a 1/1 shapeshifter, so it's a rebel, so you can get it with your commander without Maxwood in play, which is awesome. It also has an ability that lets you pay X, and then every creature you control becomes XX's. So strip power and toughness XX. It can be really good. You could spend 0 mana to kill your whole board, which of course you would never do that, but you can pay 10 mana to make your whole board 10 10s. So it's a really good way to, once you get to a certain amount of mana, to basically overrun the board and just pull out the win. So it's one of the win cons in the deck. Right, let's go ahead and start talking about some of the rebels that are in this deck. So the first one I want to pull out is this one here, Children of Coalesce. Now this is just a really strong card. When you would lose life during a turn, you can sacrifice Children of Coalesce to gain life equal to the life you would lost that turn. So it's kind of like a band-aid, basically, or whatever you would like to call it, to kind of recoup some damage lost. It's a weird kind of also reverse fog. So if you take a lot of damage during your turn, you're like, okay, I didn't take any of that damage. Let's just say that didn't happen and sacrifice it and then get that life back. I like it as kind of a surprise life gain. So like if somebody hits you for, let's say, 20 damage with a bunch of creatures and you go from 40 to 20, you're like, oh crap, half my life is gone. But with your commander, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to pay 1, tap my commander, search my deck for Children Coalesce, put it into play, and immediately sacrifice it to gain 20 life. And it's like, oh, well, that damage didn't happen. So it's kind of a cool, if you get hit for a lot, you can just do this little cool little trick that lets you pull the Children Coalesce out. Now the other thing that's kind of cool is that since it only costs 1 mana, you can pay 3 mana to put it underneath your draw deck, and if you can untap your commander or during the next turn when he's untapped, you can just tap him for 1 and do it all over again. So it's a way to kind of protect your life from taking huge hits, and yeah, I quite like it for that. Okay, now speaking about untapping commander, the this particular card, let's see here, Reveal Squad is quite good. It is a Rebel, 3/3 for 4 mana, and the thing that's really cool about this one is that whenever you're attacked, if this is untapped, you get to untap all the creatures you control. So it allows you to kind of use your commander once on one turn, if somebody attacks you again, you can untap it and get another blocker from your deck and put it right into play. Or Children Coalesce and just do that over and over and over again. So it's a kind of a really neat synergy with the commander, and allow you to get some more of those cards back into play. So I really like this one in particular in this deck. Another one, this is actually kind of a pair of them. There's Lawbringer and Lightbringer. They both kind of do something similar. So Lightbringer allows you to, for 3 mana, get a 2/2, and then you can tap it, sacrifice it to remove target black creature from the game. So basically exile target black creature. And then Lawbringer is the exact same thing but for target red creature. So you have this kind of weird red-black hatred in this deck, which can be useful and can be unuseful depending on the colors you're playing against. But it is basically an exile that you can just summon from your deck. So these ones I like to kind of summon at the end step before it's my turn. With my commander, I just grab it, put it into play, and then untap, and then immediately exile the thing that I need to exile. And it kind of works like instant speed exile. And then for 3 mana, my commander then can just put it back into my deck, and I can do it again later. Now this card I'm just pulling up really quick to kind of give you an idea what a good core of what your rebels will be doing. This one is 1 mana. It has an ability, you can pay 3, tap it, search your library for a rebel card with converted cast 2 or less, and put it into play. And then shuffle your library. So it's kind of like what the commander does, but a lot weaker. You pay 1 more mana than the cost, and you can only get very set amount of cards. So this one can get 2 or less, or 2 or 1 drop. It's a 1 drop itself, and there are more that go higher and higher. Let me grab another one really quick. Here's one. The Sky Marshal is now, here's a 5 mana 3/3 with flying. So this is one of your stronger rebels, which is kind of funny. But it has 7 tap, find a 6 or less, and put it into play, and then shuffle your library. So there's a bunch of other ones that kind of do what the commander does. So if the commander gets too expensive to play because it's gotten removed too many times, this one and the other ones will kind of make up for that and give you redundancy in your deck. Next I just want to talk about general white stuff. So this is a particular card that I think needs to see more play in white decks. It's Lotus Field. It is a land that's hexproof. It comes into play tapped, which kind of sucks, but it does. And then when it comes into play, you have to sacrifice 2 lands, which sounds like a downside, but actually that's the upside to this card. And then the final ability is tap, add 3 mana of any one color, which is in this deck going to always be white. But the reason why this is in this deck and not like a 5-color deck or something like that is that white really cares about how many lands you have in play. A lot of cards trigger, like land tax and stuff like that, trigger if you have less lands than your opponents. And this particular land allows you to reduce the amount of lands you have in play while not reducing the amount of mana you have access to. So you actually can kind of ramp, and maybe even sometimes ramp beyond what your opponents are doing because of this card. So Lotus Field is one of those cards that I kind of put into every mono white deck because it's always going to have value and it's always going to help you prop those other cards that care about how many lands you have in play. For instance, cards like Archimedes Map allows you to put lands into play if your opponents have more lands than you. So the artifact itself, when it comes into play, you get to search for 2 planes and put it into your hand. And then whenever an opponent plays a land, if they have more land than you, you get to put a land from your hand into play. The other card, Land Tax, allows you to, at the beginning of your upkeep, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you may search your library for up to 3 basic lands, reveal them, and put them into your hand, shuffle your library. So you can get your hand full of lands, and then the map lets you put them into play as long as you have less lands. So if you play something like the Lotus Field to destroy your lands, then these will trigger more often. Now, let's say you don't have the Lotus Field, and you got a bunch of lands in your hand with land hacks and stuff, and you're trying to get them into play so you can catch up with the other players. Another good card for that is Train Generator. Now, this particular land I just love. It comes to play untapped, which is fantastic. It can tap for 1 colorless, which is useful because it's actually an active land, but also has an ability for 2 mana and tapping it, so basically 3 mana. You can put a basic land from your hand into play tapped, which allows you to basically use those land tax lands and just start putting them into play. So, talking about lands, I'm just going to go over some really good ones that you should probably throw in your deck. I'm not going to talk too much about them because they are just very strong white related lands that you should just put in your deck no matter what you do. The first one will be Emir Skyruin. If you have 6 or more planes in play, if you play a 7th plane, you can basically return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it's a really good recursion. There's some good lands that draw you cards that you can have in your deck. But one of the cards I did want to point out is Nyxos Strident Nyx. It's just one of those cards that monocolor decks can really use. It's an expensive card, so if you can't afford it, it's not the end of the world if this deck doesn't have it. But it's a good way to get a lot of mana in a mono white deck, which is something that mono white doesn't do outside of enchantments with Serra Sanctum and very expensive cards. So this one in particular, even though it is kind of expensive, it's not Serra Sanctum expensive, and it's a very useful card. Most of the other lands in this deck are just kind of my personal choices and meta calls. Like the Academy here is just a meta call. There's wheels in my meta that I just hate discarding and wheeling, so I just have it in my deck. Alright, last thing I want to talk about are 2 kind of weirdly unique cards in this deck that work well with the commander. Since the commander can pull any rebel card from the deck and put it into play, you can grab other rebel permanents, and there's actually is one rebel enchantment in Bombed in Silence. It's basically a pacify, but in this case it is an enchantment that can be now pulled out of your deck by your commander because it's a rebel enchantment, which is really cool. But yeah, it enchants the creature. The enchanted creature can't attack or block. It costs 3 mana. So it's not really anything I would put into a commander deck except for the fact that this deck can just pull it out of nowhere. So if you're worried about, you know, giant Eldrazi attacking you this turn, when they move to combat step, you can just tap your commander, search your deck for this, and just slap it right on that Eldrazi. It's also a good political tool. Once your opponents know you can do stuff like this, you can be like, are you sending that Eldrazi at me? Because if you are, I'm going to bind it in silence. But if you're not, feel free to hit somebody else. I won't do anything to it. And then you can kind of, you know, make sure those giant creatures swing elsewhere, which is just great. The other thing that's kind of cool is your commander's 3-cost ability lets you take this card from your graveyard and put it underneath your deck, so you always have this available as long as it doesn't get exiled, which is fantastic. The second card I want to talk about really quick is Crypt Swap. So the deck does run Path to Exile and Swords to Plowshares, and a lot of the things that you expect to find in a mono white for removal. This is another exile target creature, and it costs 3 mana instead of 1, but it is a tribal instant, and it is a shapeshifter, so it has every tribal type. So with my commander, I can actually take this from the graveyard and put it underneath my deck. I will not, though, be able to play this from my deck because it's not permanent, so I can't use this with my commander to just get out of my deck and play it at any time, but it does let me cycle it in there. It's just my commander does search my deck for rebels constantly. My deck will get shuffled, so the fact that it goes to the bottom of the deck doesn't really matter because it will get shuffled eventually. So it's just one of those kind of removal cards that you can recur quite often with this commander, so it's quite good. Thank you for watching the video. If you want to support videos like this, please hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button and that notification button to let you know when those videos are posted. If you want me to do more things like this, post in the comments that you like these type of videos, and I will make more. I have a couple more ideas down the line of other old decks I'd like to update, like I've updated this deck, and I just want to go over a bunch of more decks that I have in my collection. So I have plans to do more. If you want to see any particular commander, go ahead and put that in the comments down below, and I will do some decks of those in the future. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye bye for now.
Roger, Roger.